Is an RSP still a useful account anymore with the tax-free savings account and a new first home savings account? We're going to take a deep dive on the situation of whether a RSP makes sense or whether it makes sense to contribute to other accounts. As most of you are aware, an RSP is a registered account that allows you to contribute to it and defer tax in the future later until you pull it out. The whole idea of an RSP essentially is to contribute to it in the high earning years and take it out in a lower tax bracket in retirement. The RSP has some flexibility with it with the first home buyers plan as well as the lifelong learning plan. But with the new first home savings account coming out, is there really use for the RSP for a first time home purchase? Before hopping into what account makes sense to contribute, we're going to talk a little bit about your group RSP. If you have a group RSP, it's important to learn about it and actually what your employer is willing to potentially match. We always recommend to clients, if your employer is looking to match a portion of what you put in, utilize that. It's free money at that point. Make sure to grow that as much as possible. All right, so we're gonna hop into our planning software here just to see the differences between what an RSP can do and if it makes more sense to actually contribute to other accounts based on the scenarios. So for this scenario, we're going to hop right into it with Dan and Julia Professional. They're both professionals working, and the income is going to vary, and we're going to see at what point does it make sense to contribute to an RSP? Does it make sense to contribute to an RSP, or does it make sense just to look at other accounts? Now we're going to assume that Dan and Julia's goals is not for a house. If it is for a house, most likely the first home saving account is going to make the most sense with the TFSA. And then potentially the RSP to help utilize the first home savings plan as well. But we're going to look deeper into what it looks like if you're saving just for retirement. So just some key data points before we hop in here. Both Dan and Julia are born in 1998. They're both 25 years old. They have a TFSA balance currently of $6,000 each and an RSP balance of absolutely nothing. They're going to look to contribute around $500 a month per person. So $12,000 a year or $6,000 each. In this scenario, Dan and Julia are making about $50,000 annually in employment income and are going to contribute that $500 a month, $6,000 a year into their tax-free savings account. And for rate of return assumptions, we're just going to assume a steady 6% throughout the plan and just to see what this value actually spits out at the time they hit retirement, which is going to be at 65 on average. So just looking on Dan's side here, and Julia's side is exactly mimicked. So we can see on both sides. But at 65, you can see that the TFSA account is actually at 1.04 million by the time they hit retirement if they kept up that deposit period of $500 a month, $6,000 a year. Now let's hop into if they were to redirect that $500 a month into an RSP and use that tax refund that they receive and put it into a tax-free savings account. So using this strategy, the double dipping strategy, to help kind of grow your account values into retirement. So you'll see $6,000 coming into the RSP, then that $1,362 of tax credit going into the TFSA. And currently at $50,000 of employment income, your marginal tax rate is around 22.7% at BC tax rates. So we're going to focus on BC just here. And that $6,000 into the RSP will push you down into the lower marginal tax rate. By the time you hit 65, you can see that Dan's TFSA is around $288,000 and his RSP is just shy of $1 million. Looking at a combined value of roughly just under 1.3 million there. So with that 1.04 million in the TFSA, you can see that you do have a little bit more with the RSP and the TFSA using the double dipping strategy. Now I know you guys are going to say, yes, the RSP is taxable when you take it out. You do kind of take that into account. Even if your average tax rate was around 15% throughout retirement, you're still going to be better off putting it into an RSP and contributing the remainder into a TFSA. Now we're going to hop into if Dan and Julia are both making $60,000 of income, how that kind of changes the account values and the tax credits that they'll receive. So this is typically when you'd want to start looking at an RSP. You can see that there is quite a big leap in terms of marginal tax rates. When you kind of hit that $53,000 mark and above, so you'll see the most tax effectiveness within that. So currently Dan's marginal tax rate is at 28.2%, which is quite a big bump from that 22.7 that we saw earlier. So we're going to follow in that $6,000 into the RSP and then contributing that tax refund, which is going to be about $1,692 into that tax-free savings account. We're going to follow it down all the way to age 65 and see what those account values are at. So they're around 342,000 in the TFSA and just shy again of $1 million in the RSP. So obviously, as you go up and you scale up in your marginal tax rate, you're going to get a bigger refund to put in your TFSA. Your account values are going to grow much more, but it's more advantageous once you kind of hit that 53,000 and above to look at using this double dipping strategy and potentially contributing to an RSP, especially if you're saving for retirement and that is your main goal. Now, one last example, just to reflect here, we're going to look at if Dan were to make $92,000 and Julia were to make $50,000. So there's obviously a spread based on income here, and there will be a spread based on their marginal tax rate as well, which will make sense to actually open up a spousal RSP. So using Dan's taxable income to lower his tax bracket and being able to contribute to Julia's RSP. So with that in mind, we're going to keep that $6,000 into the RSP. You'll see $6,000 going into the spousal as well, and around $1,843 going into the TFSA based on that tax credit. Looking at Dan's marginal tax rate, it's going to be around 31%. And by contributing $12,000 total into that, it's going to bump him down to that lower tax bracket of 28.2%. And as we scroll down to age 65, we're going to see that these account values are going to be slightly larger than before, with the RSP staying at the same amount because nothing is really changing there, but the TFSA growing quite a bit to 368,000. All in all, when you add these two account values together and kind of take into account some amount of tax owing on the RSP, you're still well ahead instead of contributing just to TFSA. All in all, when you hit that highest earned dollar, being around 53,000 to 55,000 depending on your province of residence, it does make sense to contribute to an RSP, and if you have the funds, to use that tax credit to just fund a TFSA and help your accounts just grow quicker. That spread when you're above around $55,000 of income is around 5.5% based on that leap in tax bracket. Being able to get a 5.5% guaranteed return on your tax rate, not a bad gig. If you believe your income is going to be lower in retirement, then it does make sense to contribute to an RSP. If you believe it's going to be higher in retirement, then it doesn't really make that much sense from a tax perspective, but you'll still be able to grow your accounts much more than if you were to just put it in a savings account. By using that double dipping strategy we outlined in the scenarios, it actually does help your accounts grow much quicker, and it is something that you can just not focus on and put away and let it grow, and then you'll be happy in retirement because your accounts are going to be much bigger. Get compound interest working on your side. In these scenarios, we looked at someone who is age of 25, looking to invest for 40 years into retirement. These accounts are reaching $1 million plus in value. Hope you guys were able to learn a little bit something about an RSP, whether it makes sense to contribute it to now or later in the future. Look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.